Jawara had the privilege of presiding over the embryonic days of the country. Did he do very well? Did he do well in general aspects of development?
Well, certainly he did not do well. But we must say that is after having read the Kairaba, I mean the book, where Jawara poured out his ideas, his dreams, his vision. It appeared to me he understood what should be done and where we were and how we should go. So in terms of visioning, I think Jawara had a vision. Yes.
Sorry about this.
You know, but now to practicalize that vision,
Yes.
Was where the shortcoming was.
I see. So he had a vision after all, because most of the criticisms that his predecessors, rather his successors, peddled against his legacy was that he had no vision.
No, Jawara had a vision to industrialize the Gambia, to also even understand in terms of agriculture what should be the priority and which areas of the Gambia should focus on what aspects of crops, and so on. And in terms of decentralizing development,
Yes.
because Jawara recognized that, observed the stunted nature of our development, how everything was concentrated in the Greater Banjul area,
Yeah.
and his desire to see development spread across the country,
Okay.
and the potentials there. So I think he had a vision, and I must say when I read the book, I put the book down and must have spent about an hour reflecting both with anger and appreciation. Because not just Gambia, but Jawara even had a Pan-Africanist perspective, and I've seen in that book how he spoke, so well, understanding the vision of Nkrumah. And the need for African unity. Yes. And so I was like, but then Jawara, why didn't you get closer to Nkrumah all those even more?
Yeah.
And pursue those Pan-Africanist policies, visions, and so on. Yeah. So I think that was there. But then
Maybe Nkrumah was far more radical than he was.
Yeah, well, maybe Jawara too, given his demeanor, the kind of person
He was
he was.
too much of a British boy.
Okay, but he was a typically cultured Gambian boy. If you read his biography, and so, yeah, maybe that radicalism and would think probably things would take gradual step. So I think he was a gradualist. Let me say.
Yeah.
But time doesn't wait for that.
Yeah.
So that. And then, of course, the control, because I think Jawara eventually lost control as the government became, highly inefficient, and corruption. We can recall all the way back in the 70s, Dixon Colley reporting about corruption.
Exactly.
In the 80s, Tix Mane reporting about corruption.
Yeah.
In the 90s, Dela Hadda reporting about corruption.
Yes.
And the 2000s,
course.
Republic here reporting about corruption.
Yeah.
But during his time, that 70s, 80s, and part of the 90s, so the leadership was missing. That effective, accountable leadership, to make sure not just him being that kind of a leader. I think Jawara was a very honest, decent person. Yes, I would say so. But then it was not enough for you to be a person who is honest and decent as a leader. That value needs to spread across. That objective, that standard needs to cut across. And you have to create the necessary institutional structures and enforce them. So I think that's where Jawara's failure has been or was, and I think that also explains, therefore, the failure of the Gambia over the period. I read the PPP book written by Hassan Jallow,
Yeah.
the current Chief Justice,
Yes.
Voice of the People, and I was pleasantly surprised in the book that Jawara had, the cabinet had a code of conduct for cabinet ministers. Yes. So that in many ways, I've seen, and probably that is why people say Gambia civil service was the best at the time. I've seen instruments like codes like that. I've seen reports, forms that capture some detail, And to tell you, okay, there was some understanding here, but how they have failed to really maintain that, strengthen that, so that if that was the case, I think by 1994, if Gambia was not at the level of Singapore, I mean, we should be very close. And Jawara himself probably would not have been there. And, you know, Singapore's first president, Lee Kuan Yew, I think I'm making a lot of reference to Singapore simply because we all got independence the same year.
Jawara himself or his government made a lot of reference and comparisons.
Yeah. So Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew from 65, you know, stepped down in 1990, right? And I read his book, like this book I referred to, and he said, I've said, you know, he's opened it that way. I've seen books written about how to cook, to teach somebody how to cook, how to build a house, how to create a, you know, bench or something. But he said, I have never seen a book about how to build a nation. And so he said, me, as a 42-year-old man, I had never thought Singapore would be given to me to govern. And then found himself Singapore, and he laid out the demographics. He said Chinese-speaking people there, Indian-speaking people from the Dutch Indies, and so on. I mean, just the diversity of it, and then you know, this island sort of one city sort of
city-state,
you know, all surrounded by what? How do I build this? You know, Singapore, like they said about the Gambia and Senegal, Singapore, in fact, in 1963, was forced to join Malaysia as a federation. At this Gambia, we were not forced to join Senegal, but Singapore had to join Malaysia, and it didn't work, and that is how 1965 they got out and gained their independence. So I think when he said nobody thought, I've never seen a book written about building a nation, but what did Lee Kuan Yew do? He realized the greatest resource they have is the people. So one is people. Let me invest in our people. All right. Education, housing, you know, discipline. All right. Two values. He said meritocracy. That this society, we are going to build it because if you got to hold a position, you have to merit it. You have to have the competence, the qualification to hold it. And of course, corruption. So Lee Kuan Yew was talking about corruption in 1965 as a key subject to combat corruption.
Wow.
You know, so these are the pillars that ultimately, of course, because it's such a nation, to also realize we cannot compete with Malaysia or China or India or UK in terms of industrialization. Even though Singapore is a highly industrialized country right now. But he said, look, given our context, we want to develop service sector, make Singapore a hub. So today, Singapore, out of all that Asian countries and in the world, whether it's shipping or IT or business, banking, you know, Singapore is a hub. Now, and our people here, they have talked about those kind of ideas.
Exactly.
Yes, I mean, they say Gambia is the closest to the West. I mean, you know, they will make it a hub to export trade. All those ideas were put out here.
Make it
but I think
supermarket of West Africa.
Yeah, so I think for us is the failure of leadership. Whilst Lee Kuan Yew and the Singapore leadership created values, identified values, and submitted themselves to those values and standards. You know, which is accountability. In our context, we didn't have that kind of leadership. You know, Jawara. I mean, imagine in 1984 when Tixmani exposed ministers for corruption. He promoted some of them.
Such ministers like
3 ministers.
Sabali, to his brother. Sabali was made vice president in '92. After that, I think Honorable Lamin Saho was also accused of.
I was thinking Landin Jarasongo, but I mean,
it was not Landin. It was Lamin Saho and Sheikh Sabali.
I think there were 3. So that would not have happened under Lee Kuan Yew or in Singapore. I mean, he would have taken action on those ministers. But you can see that practice is what we still have here. I mean, how many reports from investigative journalists, from the Auditor General, from the National Assembly have come out, you know, implicating ministers? And you only promote them or redeploy them or you say you send them to foreign service. Yes, I mean, and leadership, they say, makes or breaks society. And so the predicament of the Fourth Republic, really, I think fundamentally is a leadership problem. Yes, I think all of the other ingredients are available. What we needed was that leadership to organize, as Mustafa said, no country is poor. The idea, that's why I'm always constrained, to say Gambia is a poor country. We are impoverished. Our country is rich. Our people are impoverished. Yes, and and that has to be something that we should deal with.
Okay. So it is the predicament we find ourselves today. You think can the Fourth Republic be blamed for that, or did we have the opportunity through the Second Republic, perhaps, or now, to change the entire thing, or we just
so certainly the First Republic will have to take responsibility for the wrong trajectory until 94. But 94 was a huge opportunity to revive, not revive, but then to redirect the country. As SFI would say, to turn around. Yes, which we messed up severely. But certainly 1965 to 1994, a certain trajectory was instituted, of corruption, of inefficiency, of lack of accountability. That really became very ingrained. So that by 1994, of course, the option is we can either reverse, otherwise continue as usual. And either way, it will be painful for the country, because if we got to reverse, it will have to take very painful decisions, actions, because accountability wasn't really a culture, something we were accustomed to, having come 30 years, far in the PPP regime. But that was necessary.
Okay.
Now, if you don't, the way that trajectory was, if you continued on it, it can only aggravate. And this is why 1994 to 2017, a dictatorship was possible. One, because there was already a path towards that, because even, again, Jawara, because we have to speak to the facts, human rights violations were becoming a lot by the late 80s, early 90s. The NSS, was engaged in torture. All right, and we saw how the NSS became the base, for the NIA and and stuff like that. So, so that if we had not done the reversal by 1994, but merely continued, the tendency for that to aggravate to a dictatorship we had, it was very prevalent.
Okay.
All right. Well, almost inevitable, and that is what happened, which was further aggravated by the kind of, of course, it's a military regime. So either way, as long as it's a military regime, unless you have a military person of some level of political awareness, like Thomas Sankara, but somebody like Jammeh, who completely has no ideas and so on, no values, it is going to aggravate what we went through from 94 to date. And again, we have another opportunity, 2016, 2017, to make a reversal again. Yes, and apparently we have failed to do that. And so now I fear for the Gambia very much so, because we have to learn from lessons. Jawara was easy going passing, decent, nice, and all of that. But his regime, we saw the dictatorship, the corruption and, the disregard of the law, the lack of accountability, and it ended up in a military coup. And with a military that, lived on, survived on the very foundations provided by that previous regime. So that, eventually, with their own reality, it aggravated into such a violent regime. Now, so the immediate background to the current dispensation is a very violent reality. The immediate background to the Jammeh 94 scenario was not a violent reality. You know what I'm saying? So people need to think about that. Pre-94 wasn't violent. so to speak, right?
Except a few episodes.
Except 1981 happened, and
yeah.
but even 1981, we've seen documentation, Jawara responding to concerns from Amnesty International about the state of human rights. So he was aware of those things to the best of his ability to limit it. All right. But now the background to the 2017 dispensation now is a very violent background. So meaning the vestiges, the attitudes, the experience is there. So for us to drop into, another violent reality is very high. If the leadership is not there, and the leadership we have today, if it is not as weak as Jawara, probably weaker. And so on. So this is a concern for me. How do we make a reversal? This is why I am opposed to a third term also, because we have to, because self-perpetuation provides that opportunity. That fertile ground for things like that.
32 years, Jammeh 22.
Exactly. So we need to do a real critical analysis of our history and experience.
We will come to this